All right, folks, I just want to double check, make sure we have the right time. It is about 5 minutes past, so I think this would be a great time to start, even as more people are entering. My name is Bbanga, and it is my humble duty today to host today's amazing conversation. I know will definitely be, because today we are going to be discussing matters HR. I think this is something that everybody can either relate to or at least is a part of. In fact, I was doing a little bit of reading up before today's meeting, and I came across some interesting statistics. Did you know that 4 in 5 of the world's workforce is currently on lockdown? That is 4 out of the 5 people who are working throughout the globe are on lockdown, obviously due to this black swan that we find ourselves in. And if there's one familiar function to tie us all together, and when I say us, I mean as workers, as entrepreneurs, to tie all of us together, I really think human resources is the department. For far too long, the world of corporate sustainability has focused on functions related to products, operations, reputational influence. But now more than ever, we need to recognize the human element in all of this. And so for today, we have an esteemed panel of really well-recognized and accomplished people in the fields of HR and in business. And I'm going to take this opportunity to quickly introduce them. In no particular order, we have from Zimbabwe, Nguwi, who is a consultant in industrial psychology, very important. In fact, I'm really looking forward to some of the things Memory has to say. He has an extensive experience in human resource management, and so his contribution will undoubtedly be important. We also have with us the Associate Director, People, Performance and Culture and Administration from KPMG East Africa. We are honored to have Damaris Lilech. Damaris is a good friend. We have worked together on other sessions. Damaris Karibu, thank you so much for joining us today. We also have with us the KCB Bank Group HR Director. Serious individuals on this panel, I tell you. Mr. Japeth Achola. Japeth, thank you so much for joining us. We really look forward to your contribution, particularly from the perspective of banking. And also with us is the Director of Corporate Affairs in Vodacom Tanzania Foundation, none other than Rosalyn Mworia. Rosalyn, thank you so much for joining us. We're also looking forward to your contribution. And with us also is the Executive Director at the Uganda Manufacturers Association, Mr. Daniel Birungi, who will also be giving us his perspective from Uganda. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. So as you can see, this is truly an East African panel, perspectives from different industries, from different countries. So welcome again, one and all. Behind the scenes, I just want to mention a few people who will also be helping me. My job is to be on screen and keep this conversation going, but this is all as a result of Profiles East Africa. We have Vicky behind the scenes, who hopefully at some point will join us, maybe towards the end, and I'm sure she'll have a few things to say. So thank you very much, Profiles, as well as the rest of the team over there. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, human resources. To me, faced with this prospect of business unusual as the new norm, we want to delve into this topic right from the get-go, and I am going to open this up. Rosalyn, I think we will start with you. At the advent of this crisis, what was your first reaction as a leader? And an addendum to that is, what kind of strategies have you found yourself using to be able to stay focused, grounded, to navigate this situation?
Okay. Thank you very much, Derek. Again, I'm representing Vodacom, and I'll be bringing the perspective of Vodacom as a global company into this discussion. Some of you might be aware of the fact that Vodacom does exist in about 24 countries worldwide. And we also exist in about 42 partner markets across the world. In Africa, more specifically, we are in 5 markets, actually 6 markets, including Tanzania, in South Africa, DRC, Mozambique, Lesotho, Ghana, and of course, Kenya. So, you know, when this crisis hit, of course, 2 areas that I'd like to talk about here at a personal level and also at a business level, leveraging our global footprint. But let me begin with the personal reactions. As a leader, obviously, you hear about the crisis looming in your neighborhood. It started very far away, then it eventually went into the European area. That is where it came to light at the business level, because we have a footprint in Italy, where it was, you know, Italy was the epicenter of the outbreak in Europe. But then you start waking up to the fact that this might hit our way, you know, and therefore, what do we need to do to make sure that the business is ready should it ever come in our neighborhood? At a personal level, there was a lot of denial, obviously, and a lot of uncertainty, and you quickly move into shock. And you have the need to jump into action quickly. And of course, as a working mother, I'm looking at what are the things that I need to readdress at the home front and reestablish systems and foundations so that they're able to support the anticipated wave, which is around the corner. So, of course, kids were everywhere, flying kids in from across the globe, all that, a lot of panic. But in any case, quickly you have to rise up to the challenge and start looking at this also at a business level. So there, we quickly activated our business continuity plans, and we were scanning the horizon for facts and figures around this becoming a reality for Africa and eventually for Tanzania. What would that mean for us at a business level? So obviously, we are a digital company, and therefore we quickly had to set in and check our business continuity plans insofar as resilience goes. Should we ever have to work from home? Is the business ready? Are the systems in place? Are the tools in place to support that kind of position? And before it became a reality in Tanzania, we're glad that we actually did move into action, and we had our workforce test the work from home policies that we had in place. No one was notified. We treated it as a crisis. So management had agreed that we are going to pull the plug. And on Sunday, we informed everyone across the business that tomorrow we'll be testing our BCP plans and we'll all be working from home. And we had we were afforded in a way, because of our proactiveness, the chance to learn from that experience. There were a lot of learnings. There were faulty lines in some of the tools that we wanted to rely on. We had the time to address that before we actually had to go on proper lockdown as a country, as much as it was an informal lockdown. So we had the chance to do that. Today, 75% of our workforce is working from home, and we've had the opportunity to, and I'll talk about this later in detail, but we had to also look at our priorities. So what is the main priority that we have as a business in the time of crisis? And really the well-being of our staff was front and center. So we looked at, we must protect them, make sure that travel is restricted. So quickly at a business level, we stopped all unnecessary non-essential travel. International travel was first to go. Then we went into regional and local travel. You only travel on need basis, et cetera, et cetera. Events were halted, everything moved to virtual platforms, made sure that there was enough information flowing from leadership to the rest of the organization. So in a nutshell, those were the initial reactions that we went into. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rosalyn. Let me quickly switch over to the perspective from Uganda. Daniel, personally, briefly, and then at a business level, what has been the impact?
Well, thank you, Derek. The impact has been quite diverse At a personal level, of course, like Rosalyn said, there was a bit of denial in the beginning till it kept getting closer. I remember the first time we heard about the case in Egypt. That was when it hit home that this was with us and bound to get here eventually. There was a lot of consumption of social media and TV media because we had to keep catching up with what was happening. And at that time, Italy was trending for the wrong reasons. That really got flared our senses to say, okay, if it's this bad there, how bad is it going to be here? But eventually we got to grips with it. We started putting in place measures, both at a personal level and at institutional level, to manage the impacts. We did do a lot of engagement with our members because Uganda Manufacturing Association is a membership organization. So there was a lot of feedback to our members to tell them how to prepare. We developed standard operating procedures for manufacturing entities to manage the pandemic. And along the way, we managed to get to a point where we were ahead of the curve in terms of preparation. Of course, at institutional level, we did have to reduce our staffing. We usually have about 54 people working with us, and we had to reduce that number to 11. So bare skeleton staff on site and the rest working online. This has continued for the past 2 months, and at least on the Ugandan side, we're now beginning to open up. We're starting to lift the lockdown, and now it's about recovery. How do we enable our manufacturing entities to recover? How do we also as an institution recover? How do we put in place measures to ensure that we can mitigate the risk of this happening again, in case there's a second wave or in case there's another such incident?
Thank you. So I'm hearing from yourself and Rosalyn, protecting, putting measures in place, staff at the forefront. Would you say that was the same thing here in Kenya? I'll go to Damaris and then to Japeth, just in terms of personal and then obviously business impact, particularly with protecting workers, staff.
So thank
Damaris?
you.
Yeah. Okay, excellent.
Thank you very much, Derek, and welcome everyone. Very excited to see you all, my panelists and my colleague panelists and everybody else that's on this webinar. Now, I think first is my personal reaction before I even reacted as a leader. Yes, then this was very unprecedented. And initially for me, it was just one of those things that happens out there for somebody else and not for me. And so very different, and maybe watching news and wondering, what is this? But eventually reality hit, and I think it became a moment of a lot of uncertainty and anxiety for me. I remember one of the things that I discussed with my family is talking. We did a lot of shopping, not even checking whether, in fact, I found that some of the shopping that I had done was actually expired stuff. Lots of people in supermarkets, they're worried that I won't find supplies for me and my family. But immediately then after, I wore my HR hat, because with this kind of a thing, then you quickly remember that you've got a role, everybody looking up on you. And therefore then just ensuring what are the things that we're going to start thinking about. As a business, we quickly put together a response team. The first thing was to communicate way before it got closer to us. Luckily, because we are a global entity, we had a lot of communication coming from our colleagues from the other markets, especially China. So I was in touch with the HR team there on what was happening. And therefore we were lucky because a lot of work had already been done. The first thing was to communicate with what is happening with our peers. We have a lot of our staff traveling across the globe, and therefore was to restrict the travel as much as possible. And of course, then to find out where our staff were. We have over 1,000 staff across East Africa. And the nature of our work is that we have people traveling across. We had people out of Africa, within East Africa. And so quickly we wanted to know where people were. And we started ensuring just that our call trees were updated. We came up with a document that people were supposed to declare where they were, how long they'd been there, when they were expected back. But of course, as we know, this was moving very, very fast. And we quickly then had to put up a response team across East Africa, and we were in touch literally every day, you know, just keeping up to tabs what is happening in each one of the East African countries. Shortly after, we realized we quickly had to work from home. Like Rosalyn said, we were lucky that our business continuity plan was in place. That's something we'd worked on already, and so was really to test it. And shortly after the first case was announced here in Kenya, we had to quickly get people working from home. Luckily, we had a lot of that set up, but again, this was very unprecedented. So the testing of that, there were still things that we needed to put up. And from a HR perspective, then, as you would imagine, there were people who got caught up by the travel restrictions. So we had to start thinking about people who were quarantined, taking care of them, just ensuring that they were fine, what we were going to do for them as an organization. Constant communication has been key for us from a business end, technology, and just ensuring that people know that their safety and their health was utmost important for us, and reminding people of all processes and procedures that were in place, the duty of care, and who they could speak to. We used the call tree several times, so we knew where everybody is, and that has continued to date. And I'm sure at a later part of this webinar, we'll be speaking about the specifics of what we have done from a business angle, and also specifically from a HR end. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Damaris. So Japeth, KCB has a footprint in every country in East Africa. What was the business response? And maybe just personally, how did this affect you?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, yes, you're right that we are in about 6 countries within the East African region. And what you can imagine is that this pandemic was evolving at different stages in these countries. And therefore, the response was quite generic, but at the same time needed to be customized to ensure that you're addressing the individual countries at the individual level. So at a personal level, to start with, yes, of course, I think anxiety crept in, because you're wondering how will we kind of survive given the what you've seen in the media, especially in the developed countries that are struggling with the pandemic. So that anxiety was at personal level, but also being the HR director for the group, you're wondering how would you manage with your employees, because everybody is looking up to you to provide a solution, which at the point we don't all have, because this was new to all of us. Uncertainty, I think there was a lot of fear that employees may have to lose their jobs. I think our customers, we saw our customers' business going down. I think the transactions just took a dip. And that started, impacting our numbers from a business perspective. And of course, with that, then, you find your employees and the organization at large starting to think about what do we need to do to ensure that we keep afloat. But being a big player in the market as well, I mean, most of the other players are also looking to us to what is it and how are we going to react to this. So we had to be very, very kind of creative in how we deal with some of the issues that came up. So what we did, of course, we had our CMT, what we call the crisis management team that has been set up within the organization. And we had to invoke what we call our BCP, the business plan, as soon as possible to ensure that, one, the CMT will be meeting every week, probably twice a week, just to go through, how things are evolving and how do we respond to some of the challenges that we are seeing. Of course, Kenya, I think, is the first within the East Africa that announced, I think around March 12th or thereabout. So we had to put together certain structures, I think certain processes in place. We had to invoke our call tree and ensure that we can reach most of our senior leaders and all the employees at short notice. We had to come up with, or rather completely implement our BCP and make sure that, some employees were going to work from the different sites from home and others were to go and leave. So that is what we first of all worked with. And Kenya being our largest market, I think it was easier to kind of replicate this within the countries. But I think what was important that I think helped us was the need for us to communicate. I think we had to be very clear in how we communicate, ensure that we give assurance to the employees that we will work with you through this journey and create solutions as we move along. And I think we were very open. We have been very open with staff that we may not have all the solutions because this is it's a pandemic that is new, probably the first in our lifetime. But we will work with you just to make sure that we can walk this journey together. So far, it's been quite good, I think, within the markets that we operate in. I think Tanzania has been quite a big challenge, but we've done very well in coordinating and ensuring that our employees are safe. And I think we are seeing quite a good response within the East African market, which has helped us. One thing I must say is that we've been working very closely with the government directives and guidelines to ensure that that kind of also complements some of the interventions or some of the processes we put in place to manage this.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer, Japeth. Now, Memory, I want to rope you into this conversation but from a different angle, because you've heard from our business leaders how very responsive they were, taking care of their staff. I want to find out from you, as an industrial psychologist, what has been your observation? What have you seen happening at different organizations that you have either interacted with, and even taking this wider on the African continent?
Okay, thank you very much. I think when this COVID-19 started, one of the things that I did was just to observe the trends. I follow experts. So when this started, I looked at what was happening in China, and I also looked at the projections that were done for each country, because these projections were done. So from that point of view, at a personal level, what we did is we knew this pandemic was going to spread across to probably 99% of the countries. So 2 weeks before the official government lockdown, we had already started working from home. I was the only one going to work to the office because it's very close to my house. The rest of the staff were already working from home. So when the government lockdown came in, we were not affected. But what then happened is that business in general was very low because when the official lockdown came in, because the consumers were not able to move. In our case, the lockdown started, was announced on a Friday evening, and it would take effect on the next Monday. So people had no time to I was on the road actually on that day, so I only arrived on the Saturday. But we had already started working from home. So from a preparatory point of view, for my staff, we had already done that. We did 3 meetings where I explained what was likely to happen. And most of the things that we discussed actually happened because I was actually observing just trends. For organizations that are in Zimbabwe, for example, most of them were in denial. They thought this disease was never going to come to them. So they never prepared anything until the government imposed a lockdown. That's when they started running around, and it was really chaotic if you look at it from this side. The biggest challenge that I noticed for companies, especially here, is that while it's got an internet penetration rate of close to about 7%, most of them had no infrastructure to be able to enable people to work from home. What we also noticed is that about 46% of the staff or of the employees need to be physically present in the workstation because they're producers, they go into a mine, they go underground, and things like that. That's where we got most of our people employed. So it was very difficult. So what the mines then did was to seek a special dispensation from the government to be able to do their own testing immediately and quarantine the people so that they stay at the mine instead of going back into the community. So that worked very well. Probably a very good example where they put them in a compound. Most of them already have got specific compounds because they are located outside your normal town. So that worked very well. What we found also is that for the retail sector, maybe generally in Zimbabwe, the big issue was that most people did not use masks, for example. Social distancing was actually a new term, I'm sure, for all of us. It's a new term, so that was a big challenge. When I was talking to someone from Hong Kong, for example, yesterday, if you look at Hong Kong as an example, you notice that probably at this stage, they still have close to about 100 cases in total. But the trick that they did was that from day one, when they got, I think, one case from China, and I think another one from Taiwan, they said everyone must put on a mask, and they started cleaning all public places. And I thought that was a model. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, probably Hong Kong and Taiwan, probably the best examples in terms of reducing the cases. Most African countries started doing that after they had already seen people dying, that they needed to have this kind of arrangement. But I think from a psychological point of view, this was a global pandemic. That was the good thing. So normally people feel very isolated, and it becomes very severe in terms of distress and depression when it's actually happening to you alone. But if you know your neighbor is in the same shoes, normally you feel better. So I think from that point of view, all of us are actually not panicking, because we know it's happening in China, it's happening everywhere. So your neighbors are experiencing the same issues. Psychological distress actually becoming more severe when it's actually happening in your own family. Imagine if this COVID-19 was only attacking your own family. I'm sure it would be in disarray as we speak now. So that's a good thing. But generally, I think most companies were unprepared. But I'll also talk later about the psychological impact of COVID-19 and what has happened. What does research say about the impact of COVID-19? While some of the people that write are really writing speculative solutions, there is a lot of evidence relating to how people have reacted to COVID-19, how is the working from home, working from a scientific point of view, and I will share that in due course.
Data is some of the best practice that you have seen from organizations in the various interactions that you've had with them. You know, I want to find out from everyone on the panel, but before I do that, I just want to encourage all of you who are participants on this this very important conversation, that we do have a number of hashtags in case you want to talk about this on social media. We have hashtag Resilient EA Challenge and hashtag Mold a Culture. And at some point, I know the team working diligently behind the scenes will open up the chat box so that you can all pop in your questions or even your comments. So let me circle back to our panels, and we'll just go in the order that we started with. So I'll start with Rosalyn. Rosalyn, we have been talking about this for a while, certainly from my perspective as a member of the Genos family, where we try to help people manage their emotions during this unusual circumstances. And one of the things we found out that a lot of people are struggling with productivity, having to work from home or sheltering in place. What steps have you taken to sustain your workforce productivity or the productivity of your team?
Right, yeah, thank you very much, Derek, and to my fellow panelists for sharing views on the previous segments, which I also have gained some useful insights from. But then back to the question, in terms of making sure what measures we've taken to make sure that productivity continues on an operational level. So I'll circle back to how the business is looking at sustaining itself, but I'll start with the workforce. Like I said earlier, 75% of our staff today works from home. And again, I think going back to us being a digital company, we had started using many of the tools that are common to working from home, so things like Zoom, Skype, and these tools were already installed not only on our laptops, but also on our phones. So there was seamless transition into the work from home environment in terms of tools of use to ensure that there's continuity there in terms of interaction of teams, interaction with leadership, etc. So that has served us very well. But in addition to that, looking at the resilience of our network, we made sure that the tools to monitor the performance of our network could also be accessed remotely. We worked with the government to ensure that our engineers on the ground are also able to go and service our base stations, etc., without, if there are delays, and therefore the government needs to understand from that perspective of maybe getting fined, etc., that travel will take longer and whatnot. So we engaged widely externally to make sure that our business continues to be protected, and there is continuity on that front. With regards to customers, we have quite a number of retail shops. Of course, we took measures in terms of hygiene, making sure that it was well understood before a person enters any of our shops, they have to sanitize themselves. Once you enter a shop, we had demarcated the standing areas to protect, again, the staff that are frontliners, but as well protect the customers that walk in. So hygiene, frequency of, like, even at the premises themselves, or the headquarters, we made sure that we had frequent cleaning and sanitization of the workspaces visibly, so that people start feeling safe on the one hand, but then also that there's actually protection there for people that interact with our spaces. Now, we continue to have webinars with our staff. And we brought in experts because we knew there was a lot of anxiety around this time during the crisis, and people were dealing with their own families. So knowing that, we made sure that there were experts that could dial in and speak to our staff via webinars and address many of their questions. We had a virtual town hall, a first ever virtual town hall, where everybody dialed in from whatever the location they were at. Out of the 575 employees, 500 employees dialed in. So it was an all hands, and that was a true measure of the fact that whatever we had put in place was actually working, because people continued to be engaged. We had good topics to discuss at this forum, and people dialed in and shared experiences. But most importantly, I think, is what we had instituted in terms of feedback from our staff. We have what we call the Pulse Survey, which went out initially on a weekly basis, a Pulse Survey that everyone received a link on their emails, and they were asked 6 to 7 questions about how are they transiting into this environment of working from home. From there, we were able to pick challenges that our staff were facing, anxiety points, tools, incremental tools that they needed to work well, et cetera, et cetera. And we were able to turn around many of those requests. People came up with simple things such as, in my home, I don't have an office, because many of us just are used to working at the workplace, and therefore we don't have the proper setup to work effectively at home. So things like, I don't have a chair to sit in, and that is ergonomically sustainable for me to sit in for a long time. I'm working from my dining room desk, etc., table. So from that, we're able to internalize that feedback, go into the retail suppliers across town, look for discounts for our staff, simple tweaks like that. But the Pulse Survey really served us well in terms of getting cases of anxiety where productivity is concerned.
Fantastic. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And I really like that Pulse Survey. Let me just quickly pivot to Japeth. 6 countries. How have you been sustaining operations, production, and ensuring that your employees and your customers are safe?
Yeah, so I think this is, one of the things that we had to quickly put together is the safety of our employees. And I think this is one consistent message we've passed across the various meetings we've had with them, that we want to walk this journey with them. We want to, finish the line with them safe. So what we had to do was very quickly, as I said, invoke our BCP, which had 3 different sides of working. So we had people who would work from home, and we had people who would work from the alternate site, and we had people who would work from the main, or what we call the head office. Obviously, the head office, the intention why we had to move people away was to create, to meet the guidelines that we have on social distancing, just to make sure that we decongest the head office. So after communicating that to them, I think they were very happy that some of them would be able to work from home. So I think from the alternate site and from the main head office, there was not much of a challenge, because the infrastructure is very much set up, and they're ready for such an eventuality. I think where we had to do a little bit more work was those who had to work from home. And what we did is we quickly put our technology unit into action. And what they did is made it very possible by providing VPN access to our staff. That meant that they could still access our network with a very private and secure network, which made it very easy for them to then, work as if it's as if they're from the office. We did that across our group, across the group, and because we run a group kind of shared service, it was quite easy for us to have the same kind of, standards across the group. But I think to keep our employees kind of motivated, we had to keep assuring them. We also had what we call a chat with the staff, and our group CEO and myself and our ExCo team has been talking to all employees. I think what was coming up for most of them is really the anxiety and the fear of losing jobs. So we really had to keep assuring them, and that's something we still keep doing. And for each of these countries, that was one of the consistent messages that we kept passing to them. Obviously, we also had to look at how do we then ensure this productivity during this time. So once we've enabled them to work from home, I think as HR, we've been in the forefront giving them tips on how to work from home. We've also had to bring in experts just to talk to staff to ensure that they feel that they're in good hands. The other part that we found that was very useful, and we've seen it we've seen it work very well, is we had to then also keep our medical people alert. In fact, we have had our counselors contact kind of alert so that they're able to address our employee needs. And we've seen the number going up, which means that a lot of these employees, and we say they may be having issues beyond the work. So we looked at the employee in totality and say that they may have been impacted beyond work. So how do we ensure that we create support structures that they can fall back to should the need be? So that has really helped put the employees, feel that yes, as a group, we are taking care of them. As a group, we are really concerned about their well-being. And I think that has worked very well in ensuring they give the best. To our customers, yes, the central bank, and if I probably look at Kenya and most of our markets, banking sector being a more regulated sector, I think the central banks have been quite critical, quite useful in providing guidelines on some of the things we've had to do. We've realized that we are only in business for as long as our customers are. So it was very important that we work with the customers as well. We've invited those who need help. Tourism and the airline industry, as you can imagine, has been really impacted negatively. So what that has happened is that we've involved them, we've discussed with them, and we've had to restructure some of their facilities just to ensure that they can keep going. And obviously we've had to then activate our digital channels and try to push most of our customers away from the branches. And we've seen quite a bit of uptake on that. And I think, how we will get through this is just by working very closely with both our employees, our customers, and obviously the different stakeholders, including the government and the regulators. And I think that's something we're doing. And we keep, kind of reinforcing the same messages. That has worked quite well for our customers. It has worked very well for our employees. And we are still on it as we speak. Thank you.
Thanks. So you mentioned at the tail end over there, government and regulators. Yeah. And I apologize if there's a slight echo with the sound, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to sort that out. But Daniel, I want to come to you in Uganda. With the manufacturing sector in Uganda, what has been the biggest challenge for you? How are you handling this? How are you keeping productivity going? I'd love to hear your perspective, not just from Uganda, but from the manufacturing sector as well.
Okay, thank you very much. On the Ugandan side, much like Memory indicated on their side, we did have very strong regulations coming in on social distancing. And as everyone knows, manufacturing is one of those areas where it's quite difficult to undertake effective social distancing because there's a lot of interactivity in the workplace. So one of the things we did then at the very beginning was to engage with the relevant authorities and to find a middle ground within which manufacturing could continue to operate because the goods were still needed on the market. What was agreed is that for those companies that were able to house their staff within their premises, they would be allowed to continue operating. So we then went around working with our members to find ways in which they could turn their facilities into facilities that could have both accommodation and the work, the daily work. A lot of them went into setting up special rooms, setting up sanitation facilities, because of course this was not something they had envisioned coming up. Mm-hmm. At the end of it all, we had quite a number of companies taking this up, and with staff housed within the premises, that made it a lot easier. Along the way, we then engaged with government on enabling the movement because of some of the staff who are not able to stay in the factory premises. So there were special movement speech stickers that were issued. So private cars, specific private cars belonging to manufacturers, were enabled to move on the road because there were different checkpoints along the roads. This then allowed the operations of some of these manufacturing entities to go on. But of course, the challenge still remained that there were those who were unable to take on such a cost involved in setting up these facilities. So for many of those, they closed out. Of course, the other challenge was that along the way, there was a lockdown instituted with the requirements that people stay home. This then impacted the ability to also sell because the different sell points were closed off. For this, we kept engaging. And as I speak now, I think about 70% of the addressable market of our members has been wiped away in the interim. But we remain hopeful that as we start opening up, this will be addressed. At institutional level, as the association ourselves, we also had to change quite a lot of what we had to do because we then started entering into agreements to provide shuttle services for our staff. Previously, some of them were using public transport, of course, and even those that were using private transport needed special permits to move, and we didn't have those. So we organized special transportation for our staff. This was also extended to the manufacturing entities, which they managed to use. We also had to quickly upscale our ability on using online media platforms. We had to quickly run into getting on board Microsoft Teams and the like, because a lot of our work involves interfacing directly with our manufacturers. And in the current circumstances, that is, of course, an avenue for infection. We've quickly had to...
Hello.
We've managed to institute an online registry, and we're moving on in that direction.
All right, Daniel, I mean, all of these ideas sound wonderful. Let's just quickly hear the perspective from Damaris. Damaris, KPMG, if I do say so myself, I know I've been involved with you in some of the support that you're giving your team members there at KPMG, but what can you talk about, particularly this question that has to do with productivity?
Thank you, Derek. So like I started off, we have a response team, and that was very important for us because then the response team brings in information and is tracking what's happening both within the business and to our staff members across the region. And when I talk about the region, I'm talking about Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and of course here in Nairobi. So the first thing was to communicate on what plans were in place for the staff and to facilitate them. We are currently working from home, majority of our staff, but like most organizations, we have a few of our staff members, especially the support services team, that needs to be in the office. Now for that team, they are working with schedules because then we need to know who is in the office at any one particular time, facilitate them with whatever resources, should it be transport, government regulation adherence to that, provide masks, sanitize the place. So that was done, but otherwise most of our staff members are working from home. Now, unlike my colleagues, the nature of our business is that we tend to do a lot of work offsite, and therefore in terms of technology setup, that was done quite way before this because that's what we've had to do before. Of course, a little more, more tools and resources were put in place, lots of work by our technology team just to make sure that we were all able to work. But again, provision of whatever the staff members required, things like data, we had to now up that and just ensure that everybody is able to connect. There have been several meetings to update, and at departmental level, just the one thing that we did, especially for productivity and just measuring where people are, was to immediately sort of map out our active engagements by unit. What are the active engagements? Which ones can continue as they were in terms of we didn't need people physically at the clients, because then with COVID, it meant then we couldn't even send our staff members to our client premises, and where need be, then we had to get to discuss that with our clients. And then we would map how many staff members were on each of those engagements, how many hours they would need to be there. And then that was being tracked through and through by the people leaders. Our structure is such that we have people liaison leaders across all the units. So they would track which are the active engagements. Of course, like with many other businesses, some of our clients then were affected and therefore would have to put on hold an engagement here and there. And then we would take those team members that were on those active engagements and place them on other engagements. For people who want utilized full-time, then we would look at ways of ensuring those people are utilizing their leave for now. And for those that could be moved to other engagements, you will have seen, I'm sure that given the nature of business, we are in advisory business services, we have had a lot of thought leadership. We have a lot of getting back to the ground and thinking, what changes? What do we need to adjust? And so our teams have been at the forefront, thought leadership articles, engaging with our clients. One of the things we've done as far as our clients are concerned, we have kept in touch with our clients. First, to assess what impact they are having, how we can continue assisting them, what new services we can give, especially to help them sustain their business from a technology perspective. Of course, as you imagine, as we work digitally, there are many other aspects. Data privacy is now very key. Security of systems, I'm sure Japeth, who being in the banking sector, would know how critical this becomes, especially when people are having to work from home. So advising our clients, being able to support them through proper setups of this. But from an internal perspective, encouraging the business leaders to have very frequent meetings with their teams, check what everybody is doing, and support them where that is required. Just being sure who is doing what new ways do they need to do their work. Of course, with COVID, and especially looking at it from a HR perspective, lots as time was changing, then policies change, processes change, and therefore you have to sit back and maybe realign the team to start looking at different things and in a different way. So sort of realign your team to new engagements or new processes because of what is been happening. And for the response team, I think it's been a continuous activity of information and just adjusting accordingly. We are at a point now, we are already thinking, how do we start preparing for return to work? If at whatever point we need to return to work, what are we going to do? How is that going to look like? So we are already at that point of thinking. We have dealt with what was supposed to be dealt with immediately, but we're already looking at what then from here. What needs to change? What new resources do we need? How do we need to map our people? And of course, then, as we do this, is to encourage and facilitate our teams to focus now more on output, such that it is more measuring productivity. And when you look back, and I'm sure we're going to be discussing this in a little bit more detail later, what changes in the whole cycle of business and what needs to be done from a risk perspective, because risk is key. Now risk management is very key. The other thing that we've done quite a bit is based on government regulation and all the changes happening, is to see how are those changes going to affect businesses and still remain compliant, interpret that and help our businesses see what those changes mean in terms of impacting their businesses. For instance, tax issues, what does that mean for our clients as well as for ourselves, communicating that with our clients and just helping them then to be able to sustain business. But I think the first and most important thing was to facilitate our staff members to be able to continue with what they were already working on, or rearrange them so that everybody is active. And where then you're not fully leveraged, being able to say it's time to take leave and support you through as you continue working. And we are tracking this on a continuous basis and guiding the business as well as guiding the various team members separately.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution, Damaris. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached about the halfway segment of our conversation today. It's at this point that we will open up the chat box or the chat function for you to pop in any questions to our esteemed panelists, or if you have any contributions or indeed any feedback that you might have. And I would like to ask Memory, particularly from your unique perspective as an industrial psychologist. We've heard what KPMG are doing, what KCB are doing, the Ugandan Manufacturing Association, and what Rosalyn is doing with Vodacom in Tanzania. But are you seeing these best practices across the board? In other words, particularly from the people side, because this is what we're talking about, what in your estimation would be the best practice, and where have you seen the ball being dropped? Memory? Memory, could you hear me? Let me try and unmute you.
Yeah, you're okay. Thank you very much. I think the responses given so far, remember this COVID-19 is a big social experiment, and some of the things are not written anyway for anyone to copy. So you can see the diversity in terms of the responses, but I think what you can see across all of it is that the health of the employees and safety was the top priority, and across the globe. That's the first thing that people have done. Then the second issue is to do with the productivity of employees. But you must also remember that most organizations do not have the data to be able to compare the baseline from a baseline point of view to where they are now in terms of output per worker, because they don't have that data because of the obvious, this is an emergency. So it may be too early, especially for Africa, to be able to say productivity went up or down at this stage, because we don't have that kind of information. But if you go back to research, you will notice that the latest research that's coming out is actually indicating that, yes, while others are claiming that working from home, people are very productive, it's actually, if you look at the latest research, it's actually showing that it's actually mixed. The findings are mixed. You need to have a mixture of the two. Because once you start working from home, we are also making an assumption that the person working from home has got the right environment. We are also putting on hold family issues that are likely to emerge in the home environment. If you look at the evidence so far, you will notice that domestic violence has actually gone up significantly across Africa and across the globe. And that, don't take that lightly. And you can't work in a home where there's domestic violence. And also remember, as you stay at home with all the relations that you have in the house, you start noticing also problems in the house, and it creates complications. So what research shows is that people get fatigued by working from home because of the issue that I've talked about. If you look at research, there are disturbances, kids are running around, there's television, there are relatives still walking into your house without notice sometimes, all those issues. So there are many disturbances in the home environment. But I think the biggest challenge is to do with the type of leadership that is required for people to work from home. But if you look at current leadership styles in most organizations, it's actually related to control, direct and control. Now we are going to supervise someone that you are not going to see their face. You don't know where. Most of us have invested a lot of money in clocking systems so that people can come in and clock, and we record what time they've walked in. And when they leave, we clock. How are you going to clock at someone's house at this point in time? So those are all challenges. So the hierarchical kind of leadership style that we are used to is not going to work. It's actually going to constrain productivity for people that are working from home. So the biggest challenge is really on leadership, to start reorienting your leadership to be able to supervise digital people who are working in a digital format. But also, if you look at it, yes, initial studies are showing that there is increased productivity when people start working from home, naturally because of excitement, there's good performance coming out of that. But if you then look at the studies, they are actually showing that the productivity will start going down at a certain stage because people get fatigued from working from home, and you need to give them a lot of support. Remember, when people are working from the office, they have already established very strong social networks or social support to be able to deliver teamwork. When you have a problem, you walk into someone's office, now you have to phone them or send an email. They may not respond. They may not actually be in the house. Just to give you an example that happened here in Zim, for example, the supervisor was checking on someone and they'd already moved from one town to another, only to discover when they required certain information, the person was not close to the computer to be able to give that kind of information. So these are all complications that come in with working from home. But the other challenge is really to do with, if you look at most of the studies, what they're showing is that roughly split, basically depending on what study you're looking at, but on average, you're looking at there are people who are actually claiming that they are prepared to work from home permanently, roughly about 46%. That's a good statistic. But in the same group of people who are claiming to want to work from home, you also notice that there is a significant component, close to about 29% of those people say they are feeling lonely when they're working from home. And if you have looked at most of the psychological articles that have written, emphasizing the issue of loneliness. And this is not loneliness from your family, it's loneliness from the people that give you support to get the job done when you're in the workplace. Because you can't ask your parents or your spouse about certain things in your working environment because they have no idea what it's all about. So that's a big challenge. So these are all factors that need to be taken into consideration. I will not talk of productivity increasing or going down at this stage, because we're still very early in the experiment, whether this will work or not. My prediction is that we are going to have this kind of scenario for the rest of the year of 2020. And for those that have got access to collecting information, this is the right time to actually collect information so that we can look at the trends in terms of output. We can look at the trends in terms of whether working from, there's actually a difference between working from home and working from the office. So those are some of the issues that I have noticed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Memory. Now, I know some questions have come in, and I understand that even some of the participants have sent messages to the panelists directly. But I see a couple of questions here for Japeth. Japeth, there's a question here. How do you support your heads of department and line managers to practically monitor the productivity of their teams remotely? Just a brief answer, if you will.
Thank you. I think one of the things that I mentioned that we've said is that we've opened quite clear lines of communication with our line managers, because we've realized that, you know, the size of our business and the size of the regional presence that we have to find a way of disseminating the information with clarity to our line managers. So there's what we've done. There are two-pronged approach to this. One, we have communications with line managers on a weekly basis through the CFT that we disseminate some of the guidelines that we've shared and get feedback on what's happening at the branch levels or the head office levels. But also what we've done is that we have appointed what we call our wellness champions across the country and the region. What these wellness champions are is that they are the ones who are really making sure that, you know, our employees have access to first-hand information as far as any support they need is required. So I think for us, communication with clarity has been the biggest game changer, and making sure that, you know, we keep sending out information. We empower our line managers with lots of information to be able to address most of these issues within the branches, because the way we are spread, we have no choice but to ensure that they are able to address this. So line managers and wellness champions have been, you know, the main the offices we've used to ensure that we are able to disseminate the support that the employees need.
Thank you, Japeth. Mr. Birungi, there's a question here from Yasin. Have any members of your association declared to quit, or maybe decided to quit because they will not survive for other reasons? Again, just a brief response to that.
Okay, we've actually undertaken a survey of our members, and there's an indication that about 20% of them are likely to fold because of this pandemic. Of course, we do realize that 3 months of lockdown, of inability to sell is a long time in the life of a manufacturing entity, especially when we see that about 40 to 50% of our members are running on business loans. So we're trying to work with the banks to ensure that there are longer term payment plans in place. And we're also trying to provide business development services to these members to ensure that they come back, that they're able to survive this period.
Thank you for that. There's a question here from Jared to everyone. And he's asking, one common strategy of ensuring that staff remain engaged and productive is communication. I guess that's a statement and a fact that he said. But he goes on to ask, can we say that over-communication, and let me just get my chat here, is essential during such kinds of crisis? To what extent and frequency should employers communicate with staff? And Damaris, I want to bring you in because I know you want to mention something related to this, particularly with staff engagement at KPMG. So can you answer this question and also make your point briefly?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Derek. I think that we can speak about over-communication. Maybe the issue would be, what are we communicating about? And who is the right person to communicate whatever it is we want to communicate? And I think the strategy would have to be very different. For strategic matters, then it needs to come from the top leadership of any organization. We have had to have staff meetings for everybody across the region addressed by the CEO. And that is because for that particular information, it needs to come from that level. Then there would be communication that needs to come from the unit levels or from the line managers, all the performance managers, depending on the structure of this of the respective organization. And then there would be communication that's just within a small team. Of course, then would have communication. So for instance, I talked about a rapid response team, which for us is headed by our COO. Any communication to that effect then is communicated by the COO. So what I think I would like to say in respect to communication, it is just dependent on what is it that you're communicating, because you're not communicating for the sake of communication. If it is for the whole group, the whole staff, then it needs to be communicated by the right person in the right, in terms of, are you doing that weekly? I think when you have to keep updating people on any information, you need to check, who is this for? What is the intervals that it should be communicated and by who? And again, even through what forum? Sometimes the virtual meetings, sometimes it's written, and I think that's what I would say to that effect. And I'd like to also mention in relation to encouraging people and you know, just keeping people engaged. One of the things that we started about 2 years ago, and we now continue within this period, of course, with very specific topics, is we hold monthly staff engagements. They are voluntary, they are run by the HR team. And we look at topics that are relevant to people and are not technical, because we do appreciate, we go to the workplace as total human beings, people with families, people who are parents, financial, you know, we have to manage finances and so on. So one of the things we've been doing, and I would like to thank Derek and Zuhura, who are my peers in emotional intelligence coaching. We have had a session just this week for everybody on emotional management and resilience. And that was a very interactive session. And it just, you know, created a forum for people to understand, number one, it is okay to feel the way you feel. All of us will go through those motions. We'll wake up one day and you don't want to get out of your bed. We'll get anxious at some point. Nothing wrong with that. It is how you deal with that. And most important then, that with all these changes, the only person that you have control over is yourself. You're the only one who determines how you respond. And that was a very good forum. And we used to have those as monthly sessions. We now have moved that to bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks we'll have a session. And we have then gone ahead and encouraged the team members, all the staff members through the HR team, to tell us what topics they would like us to discuss and who are the speakers, the experts they would like us to bring. Should it be mental health experts, financial management, because a lot of us have had to adjust based on what is happening. And I think that has been very, very, very useful. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Damaris. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to let you know that it is 10 past the hour. This meeting or this conversation was supposed to be 1 hour. And so I can understand if people perhaps have to jump on to another meeting or the last meeting of the day. We are going to continue this conversation until 5:30. So let me just share some of the comments. I'm sure you can see them, but I think it bears repeating. Some of the comments from some of the participants here. There's a gentleman here by the name of Ido who has said, what we have done in my organization is to monitor the productivity of the team, is to emphasize on the quality of work beyond the length of time spent in front of the system. So in essence, managers have been told to continue to encourage their team members and to trust them to do the right thing. I'm looking for some other comments that were here today. A lot of people also saying thank you for this. So panelists, asante sana, great job. Let's see if I can come up here. I may not be able to go up and scroll up to my comments, but I'm sure my colleagues behind the scenes might be able to send those to me. So I think what I will do here is just go into some of the pre-planned questions that I had, and then we'll get back to the questions. And Rosalyn, as we're sort of coming to the tail end of our conversation, what do you see in terms of business models adopted now and in the foreseeable future? I mean, memory is saying that this is going to go on until 2021. What say you?
Yeah, it's actually a scary thought that this is going to carry on for quite some time, but I think it also forces us as business leaders to think of how to evolve our organizations to be fit for the future. And one prominent thought that comes to fore is the need for organizations to evolve themselves into being an agile organization. So, you know, a need for teams, smaller teams working together more efficiently, testing theories, testing products, testing services, quickly failing, revamping and moving on. So smaller, effective team, agile way of working, it would be a way forward. But also businesses evolving into being purpose-led. I feel like this is an area where we can expect the future business models to follow. So being purpose-led, and then also when it comes to recruiting, recruiting individuals that bring together a beautiful harmony of skill, but also digital savviness. We've seen one common thread in all that we talk about here is the use of digital platforms on engagement, on interactions, running meetings, doing tasks. Everything is going digital. So gone are the days where this is a luxury skill to have. And therefore, in the future, also our people would need to come in with some understanding of use of digital platforms and being able to work in a digital environment, and even the skills that we'll need to keep an eye on while recruiting is, you know, now we've touched on how do leaders lead their teams in a virtual setup. So these are the skills that would be useful. And our individuals would need to come to the table with such background as well. And I think also, you know, in a nutshell, we've seen how the external affairs role and the HR functions have really come to the rescue. And businesses in the future would have to make sure that they have robust systems within their HR function, as well as external affairs and communications in general. One common thread here has also been how well we have communicated with our staff within our organizations, but also externally. So communications is a key lever that would carry any business in the future as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Let me bring in a question over here, which is tied into one of the questions that I wanted to ask. There's a gentleman by the name of Yuri Corrett, who is a young entrepreneur. I actually do know him personally. And he says, in reference to the bestseller, Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson, I believe, how can we anticipate for change, monitor change, adapt to change quickly, obviously during these unusual circumstances? And again, maybe that speaks to your industry. Japeth or Daniel, do you want to take that question, either one of you?
Yeah, I think in the banking sector, I mean, one of the things that this pandemic has taught us is that, you know, it's not the strongest of the species, okay, or those that are most intelligent who will survive. It is those who are able to respond to change and respond fast. So we've had to really think very quickly, what is it that is changing and how do we adapt to changes? So I think as my panelist colleague has said, that some of the things that we never thought would happen, I think we've had to adopt and accept that this is the new way of doing things. I mean, in my organization, for example, one of the things that we've really adopted today is, the virtual meetings, which is something you would probably never have thought 2 months ago. But COVID seems is becoming the most, it's the accelerator to these changes. We've had to think out of the box. We've had to be very innovative in how we do things, just to ensure that we're able to still serve our customers. So for us, it's around how do we adopt to change very quickly, and how do we think beyond the comfort that we've always had, that this might just be one of those things that we've never anticipated, but we've had to deal with. So it's around, it's around being ready for change, it's around saying these are the learnings we've had, and this is how we need to move forward if we are to survive.
Thank you for that answer, Japeth. Memory, let me ask you, what kind of evolution do you think we'll see in terms of governing or governance, particularly laws governing employment? Let me put it like that. Whether it's work hours, contractual areas, health, safety, employee wellness, all of that. What do you see as the future?
Okay, thank you very much. I think, like I indicated at the beginning, this is probably the biggest social experiment in the workplace. So we are navigating in probably an area that we have never been. But one of the things that is likely to happen, which has already started happening in other developed countries, is a headcount reduction. But if you look at most African countries, they've actually not done that for various reasons. We feel sorry for each other. I'm sure maybe that's why we have not taken that. Because other businesses also have reacted very quickly in order to protect their market share and also obviously to protect the balance sheet from a shareholder's point of view. But in most African countries, you will see that they wait until the organization is depleted to an extent that they may not even to be able to give anyone who then is retrenched or lose their job anything, depending on the regulatory environment in each country. So the reaction, the movement in terms of the business models has not happened as quickly as we would expect in other businesses. Yesterday, I was reading somewhere where they were indicating that the number of new online businesses that have been registered across the globe has increased significantly, because these are people who are trying to shift the business model so that they can get other source of income. And this is what we would have expected, even for the startups in Africa, to be able to say, if you are depending on a physical contact with the customer, how else can you earn money? So diversity in terms of your income is very crucial at this stage. And contractual issues, naturally those will have to change, but I also see that I'm sure for all these panelists who are here, who are in HR, you're noticing that there's some people or roles that don't need actually in the organization. For now, I'm sure you can already see, I don't need this role and this role. And eventually there will be a realignment of the headcount. There will be a realignment of the organizational structures. You will have to invest in the leadership of the organization so that they can manage in the new normal, especially where they're managing people that they may not even see for the whole month, for the whole year. They may even be just even to hear their voice without necessarily seeing their face. Given the problem in Africa, internet connectivity, electricity, and many other problems that we find in Africa. But one of the things that you need to pay attention to is, which probably is going through most people's minds, is the issue of anxiety that is arising out of just health on its own, because the health for everyone is a top priority. So if your family is not healthy, anyone in your family is sick because of COVID, remember COVID did not put on hold all the other diseases. They're still within the house, they're still within the home. So people are still going through trauma related to other social ills that we normally find in Africa. So those are still there and people need to cope with them. Over and above that, they need to look for a laptop. They may not have a laptop. They need to look for internet connectivity. Others say they will be giving data bundles to staff so that they can work. Job security is a big issue across Africa, and it will be there for a very long time to come. So what is probably the best way to deal with some of these issues is to share as much information as possible. When I was looking at some of the strategies that have been used, communication is very crucial, especially when you communicate so that people can form informed decisions. There is no need to ambush employees with decisions. They must know this is coming. They must see the trend in terms of where the organization is going. So those are the issues that we expect organizations to be doing. But generally, there will be disruption.
Okay, I have a two-part question for Damaris. So you'll have to answer these very quickly. Number one, and this comes from actually one of the participants. So Sarah is asking, any disciplinary issues have you seen cropping up, particularly with this situation of working from home? And then the second part is, would you support working from home after the lockdown? Damaris.
Okay, good, thank you. So disciplinary matters, not yet. I've not had at least to handle any, but definitely as this becomes part of the new normal, we must be prepared. It will come up, especially because we were working with human beings. Things will definitely crop up. And I think in handling that, what is most important is communication, compliance, and making sure that you're very compliant with your own policies and procedures. And of course, with any disciplinary matter, being fair and just listening to all sides and just then getting documentation in everything. So not yet handled any, but I think that I will be handling one. I mean, if we will, as HR people, this will come up as this becomes part of the new normal. In terms of working from home, I think this is the way to go, and quite a number of organizations already started working from home, but not in a very structured way. COVID has come to only fast track this. But I think then what we have to put in place is how we support our staff members, how we ensure we are able to measure output and be able to support people. As one of my colleagues said earlier, I think one of the things that I was looking forward to very much is working from home. I really hate being in traffic. And of course, many times I was in traffic, I thought to myself, because I already had the resources, why not just sit and work from home? But now that I've had to work from home continuously and possibly because it's been forced out on me, I think I won't like it full time. I'd be looking at a hybrid structure where every so often then I can get out there, interact with my peers. So yes, working from home, I think is the way to go. Question would be the structure of that, just so that then we don't only go to the office just to work. There are many other benefits to that. So how do we incorporate those other aspects of our social beings in the new structure of working from home?
Okay, Daniel, there's a comment here from, let me get this gentleman up. He says, at Tanzania Breweries, this is from George, we have launched a return to workplace instructor-led training for all staff so as to ease them into the new normal. Can you quickly comment on that? And then there's a broader question to do with technology. And of course, what you see as the future. So can you just quickly address those few points?
Certainly, yes. I think what Tanzania Breweries has done is commendable, because definitely as we get into the new normal, there are going to be new requirements on our staffing. Part of it is, I think we are moving into a phase where we will not be hiring for experience, but rather hiring for skills, because the new normal requires new skills, requires IT skills. The other bit is also about the need for us to reskill and upskill, because as it is for our case as the Manufacturing Association, prior to COVID-19, we were using these online resources, but barely using them. Now it's the core bit of our business, and so there is need for us to really focus on it. On the technology front, I think companies need to start thinking about putting a bit of the engagements online, so that if there is ever any other situation like this, we are resilient enough to quickly switch. I foresee a situation where a lot of companies may even opt to say, for some sections of staff, sometime maybe once a week you work from home and the other days you work from work. So we can keep testing these systems and ensure that we are ready to go in the event there is such an initiative comes up. The other bit is, of course, there is going to be a need to invest in technology, because this shows us that technology is key in terms of moving us forward. And so it's important that our budgets, our different company budgets, have a focus on how do we upscale our technology to be able to manage a lot of this. The last one is that there is going to be a need to also invest in our people. I believe it's time for HR managers to look at the skilling budgets, because ordinarily this is a period for cutting down on expenditure, but I believe training budgets should be increased so that people can be able to move into the new normal.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Daniel. Well put. All right, folks, as usual, conversations like this can go on literally forever, and we always never seem to find the time. And so what I'd like to do at this juncture is, as we bring this conversation to a close, and with apologies that I wasn't able to get to all the questions and the comments, but thank you very much for your participation. I'm going to ask our panelists to engage in what I'm going to call the lightning round. And it's nothing too scary. It's simply your closing thoughts, but a lightning round or a heartbeat round where it's 30 seconds of what you want to leave us with today. Rosalyn, we'll start with you.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for your very insightful contributions. I think in my 30 seconds, I think what I want to share with everyone is just that in terms of what COVID has presented us as a community, as a human community, I feel like it's a gift in a way, because it's really forcing us to reinvent ourselves at a personal level, at an organizational level, and to embrace the change as well. And I feel like we are given many gems to work with. The new norm is disruption. The resilience that has been afforded to us by COVID is now forcing us to think of things that we're talking about here. And, what is the future recruitment going to look like? What is future learning going to look like? Future skill sets, what are they all about? And we're able to integrate many of these lessons here today for our children, for the betterment of the whole community. So yeah, those will be my parting words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosalyn. Japeth, your lightning contribution.
Yeah, I think, and thank you, colleagues. Thanks everybody for such an insightful session. I think for me, this moment has actually provided us, with challenges that we've never had considered as an organization, which has made the art of employee engagement more complex and very urgent. How we respond to a crisis needs a process that is very transparent, very consistent, and very respectful, that will equip our staff with the relevant information and knowledge that they need, because they are the most valuable assets of our organization. We have resources to work towards a stronger future, mitigate confusion and stress now that we've learned a few things as we are in this situation. And times of uncertainty are also times of opportunity. It has also provided a lot of opportunity on the way forward, what we will do differently as we go ahead. And we are seeing this becoming the accelerator for one of the greatest workforce transformation going forward. How we work, how we shop, how we exercise, will all change in the long term, and hopefully for the better. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Japeth. Daniel, do you want to give your quick lightning closer?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Derek, and thank you to all the presenters. Mine is really to say that we need to think about agility as companies. How do we become more agile? Because what this has taught us is that bureaucracies that require a lot of decision-making levels are left in the back. How do we ensure that, for example, our staff who are working at remote locations have the ability to make decisions quickly? That is key for us to move on. The second bit is networks. What has kept us as an organization going through this period, and for our members, is the ability to be part of a network that is able to quickly turn around the need for PPE, the need for sanitizers and the like. And so network building is key. And then thirdly is the issue of supply chains. I think this has taught us that we need to disintermediate between the supply and the production side to ensure that we are quick to market and that we are able to quickly turn around changes in the event that they are needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Memory, your lightning contribution. Final thoughts. Memory, are we together? Hang on. Let me see if I can unmute you. Could be that. All right, you know what? We'll come back to you in a second. Oh, there you go. Okay, go for it.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, and also to the panelists and also the participants, thank you very much. A very engaging discussion. My message is that to all of us is that work will never be the same. It will never be the same. Everyone needs to adapt to the new normal. And this new normal starts with each individual. Don't wait for your employer to actually start the changes. The changes must start with the individual. But also, more importantly, is that the notion that work is a location should go away. Work is output, and the location is irrelevant. You can still produce from where you are. And that is my message to everyone, that let's embrace work as output rather than location.
Thank you so much for that memory. And Damaris, now I'm going to slightly amend the lightning conversation because I know there's a question here that you have been itching to answer. It had to do with the question of public transportation. So please, if you can quickly answer that question and then give us your final contribution, Damaris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. On public transport, I've seen a question as to whether organizations would consider giving public transport. I think we've got to shift our minds to a new normal. And the new normal would mean, before I can think about public transport and provision of public transport, I've got to ask myself, why am I providing it in the first place? What is it that I want you to go and do physically that you must be there? And the resources and support then that is provided becomes necessary. So I think that question would be answered based on industry, the need, and the objective at any one point, and even how many people will we need in the offices going forward. So that's the way I would answer that question. Now, in terms of my parting shot, I'll do it in two ways. I look at it from an individual perspective and to my peer HR professionals. I think individually, I would leave everybody with a quote by a Japanese poet called Ami Selwyn, who said, "The band burnt and I saw the moon." Meaning, until his band burnt, he had never seen the moon. Sometimes things will be thick, things will be tough, but on the other end, there'll be something good about it. So with all these troubles, then I think let's ask ourselves, have we seen the moon yet? And maybe look out for the moon as the band burns. And finally, I think for my HR professionals, during our HR conversations, we're always asking ourselves, are we strategically positioned in the organizations? If we look at the impact of this on the entire employee life cycle, starting from talent acquisition all the way to separation, things have changed. We need to do it differently. Question is, are we well equipped to assist our businesses and help them to get to the next level following this pandemic and any others that will come in the future? So the field has already been set for us. We are supposed to sit in a strategic position. It's upon us to find ourselves there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Damaris. And at this point, just before we wrap up, I'd like to invite the Managing Director of Lindum Group, who has also been really instrumental in bringing our panelists together, Zuhura Muro, if she can possibly unmute herself, or at least if we can get to see her wonderful face. I'm sure she has a few things that she would like to add as we wrap up our conversation today. So Zuhura, if you're there. Oh, there she is.
Yes, there I'm here. I was following a very insightful conversation from home, as usual, and I'm happy that you have discussed very well. You have taken me by surprise, but I thank all the panelists for a very great conversation they have had today. And I believe Vicky has prepared a very good closing remarks for our distinguished panelists. And Derek, I thank you very much. I pass it over back to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Zuhura. Actually, I think the honors have been passed to me to wrap up this conversation. So it is without doubt, I think, been really insightful as we can tell by the questions that have come in through the chat, those we could address, those we couldn't address, a lot of the conversation going back and forth. Clearly, this is not going to be the end of this conversation. We will endeavor to have as many of your questions answered, even by the panelists at the end of this. But what I'd like to do now is thank Nguwi, who's of course an industrial psychologist, and for your contribution, particularly from your perspective of HR management. Damaris, thank you so much for your contribution as Associate Director at KPMG East Africa, People, Performance, Culture and Administration. Japeth, Achola, thank you very much. Your insight, particularly from the banking perspective, as the Group HR Director at KCB Bank Group. Rosalyn Mworia from Tanzania, thank you. As Director of Corporate Affairs, Vodacom Tanzania Foundation, I really enjoyed your insight. And Daniel from the Manufacturing, Uganda Manufacturers Association, your input as well. There were certain themes, I think, that were running through this in terms of we have to brace ourselves, we have to prepare ourselves. Things are not going to change anytime soon. If that's the one thing that I can take away from this, we've discussed a lot of best practices, what everybody is doing in their respective industries, but this is something that I think can be applied to everybody, whether you have a two-man shop as an interpreter, or you're running a conglomerate or a huge business like our panelists. So on behalf of Profiles International and Vicky Karuga and the rest of the team behind the scenes, and for myself as an emotional intelligence practitioner from Genos, but also associated with Profiles International, I want to thank you all for your participation. Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful weekend and all the best. God bless and take care. Thank you very much.